Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 on the Curse of Palmyra, dealing with the missing Grahams. So if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, what you want to do is push the pause button, watch those, and then get back with us, because these videos build on each other. I also want to mention first off is that Stephanie Stearns was found not guilty for the murder of Eleanor Muff Graham in a court of law. So let's just note that for the record. Okay, let's get into it. So where we left off, the last communications with Mac Graham and Muff Graham on the Sea Wind was on the 28th, August 28th, by ham radio with this guy here, Kurt, I don't know if it's Schumacher or Shoemaker of Waimea. He had contacted Mac through their twice weekly scheduled conversations. Mac was on Palmyra with Muff, and then the other couple was on Palmyra. That was Stephanie and Buck. They were the only couples left on that date. Kurt spoke with Mac, and they had a conversation, so he was alive on that date. And then they weren't ever seen from again. And this is going to talk about the search. And I always want to talk about it. There's always a hero of the piece. In a way, this guy was one of the heroes, because not only did he take note that the conversation stopped, he also raised the flag and diligently went after the authorities to try to find the missing couple. This article reads, the next time Shoemaker tried to reach the Sea Wind, he got only silence. I thought possibly they had transmitter trouble, he said, but the fact that he couldn't fix it, he being Mac, by the way, but the fact that he couldn't fix it seemed pretty strange, because he could fix just about anything. I let 3 weeks go by, which allowed plenty of time for him to come back up to Hilo, Shoemaker continued. Then, worried, contacted a friend with an airplane on a research project on Fanning, Dr. Martin Vitusek, a yachtsman and a University of Hawaii scientist. I just want to note here that these folks are old salts, really old salts. They've been in the yachting community. Dr. Martin Vitusek had also spent time on Palmyra. They knew each other. They knew the island. These aren't people that are newbies that just kind of sailed onto Palmyra like Buck and Stephanie. So Schumacher does the right thing. He gives enough time to pass for just normal, hey, the Grahams left and let's wait till they get in port somewhere. He gives enough time to pass, and then he reports them missing to the Coast Guard about 3 weeks after August 28th. And he explains to the Coast Guard, but he couldn't convince them that this was a problem, because, they just were like, whatever, boats go traveling, maybe they just didn't contact you. Okay, so he says, quote, I couldn't convince the Coast Guard to search, although I had come to the conclusion that something happened to them. It seems they have to have a major catastrophe before they, the Coast Guard, will do anything. So getting panicky, Shoemaker contacts Martin Vitusek on September 25th. And he convinced him to fly over Palmyra to look for the Grahams, and this happened on October 4th. And he reported back that he didn't see a thing. So Vitusek flew over Palmyra, but didn't see a thing. He didn't see any boats, and he didn't see any people. And you also have to keep in mind, you might have said, why didn't he land? The landing strip on Palmyra was broken down, it was busted, and it had all these little birds all over the landing strip. So anytime they even thought of trying to get any kind of flying vessel to land, they had to be cleared, and it just was nearly impossible. So it just was not used as a flying strip anymore. It was just too derelict to try to land any kind of plane on Palmyra. So Vitusek has come from the University of Hawaii research station that was on Fanning. That's 200 miles from Palmyra. He flies over, and then he lets everybody know there's no boats and no people. So Schumacher said, we figured they had left and we didn't know where they were. Here's a picture of the Sea Wind on the left with Mac in one of the dinghies at the lower bottom. And here's a picture of Mac and Muff on the Sea Wind in Palmyra. This is probably one of the last pictures taken of the couple. So where the heck was the Sea Wind? Where were Mac and Muff Graham? Well, I'll tell you. The Sea Wind was taken to the tuna packers. The Allens, in other words, Roy and Stephanie, sailed the Sea Wind to Oahu, and they put the Sea Wind in at the tuna packers' dry dock facility on Honolulu. This article reads, instead, they sailed into Kewalo Basin, a busy fishing fleet harbor near downtown Honolulu, and into the tuna packers, a boat repair service. Buck wanted some changes made to the Sea Wind, changes such as a paint job and a new name. They already had tried to disguise the boat with some lavender paint, an unusual yacht color. They paid for the work in cash. And note that witnesses on the island or the atoll of Palmyra had said that Stephanie and Buck only had $10 in cash when they were there on the Iola. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard was conducting a search. Quote, after we heard from Shoemaker, we put out a routine notice to all ports and ships to be on the lookout, said Chief John Stafford, a spokesman for the 14th District office here. Quote, we had no real reason to be concerned because the drill is quite routine. People are overdue all the time. This article reads, the Advertiser learned that Allen and Stearns had spent the previous week working on the vessel at Tuna Packers Boatyard in Kewalo Basin, paying their yard bill in cash. And Pollock, and let me note that Pollock is one of the people that they did not like, allegedly on the atoll. Like, he liked to hear the sound of his own voice, and also they're really going to dislike him because he's going to be involved in spotting them. So later on, they're always going to they don't like him. So Pollock said Allen had only $10 on him when we left them in Palmyra. And you know, they don't print money on Palmyra. So if they only had $10 on them on Palmyra and then they end up at Tuna Packers paying in cash, you got to wonder where they got that money, right? So the Allens, cough, 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 Stephanie and Buck arrive on the Sea Wind, not their vessel, at the Tuna Packers, and they're wanting her stripped down. And Buck, pretending to be Roy A. Allen, went to the State Harbors Division to register this stripped Sea Wind as Lokahi, meaning of one mind. I find that quite interesting, of one mind. Like maybe he and Stephanie are of one mind? So let's switch over to Buck Walker, Wesley Walker's own book that he published. Yes, he published an 895, give or take, page book telling of this fanciful tale of what happened on the Sea Wind. So let's give you a little taste of this. So Buck and Stephanie have glided onto the scene with the Sea Wind, not the Iola. And people are going to ask them questions, right? So Lorraine came over to have coffee with us. We mentioned the need to haul out, and she recommended Tuna Packers, a dry dock facility in Honolulu at Kewalo Basin. When Lorraine asked about how we'd acquired such a neat boat, it caught us both flat-footed. After a few moments of embarrassed silence, me thinking furiously to come up with a credible answer because I knew the lame story concocted with Larry wouldn't pass muster with any reasonably intelligent person, Stephanie took up the slack by telling her that we'd bought it from a rich yachtsman. She pointed out a photo on the wall of Mac and Muff aboard the Sea Wind, and at least Steph's answer served to head off further questions. I called Tuna Packers and was told it would be a few weeks before they could accommodate us. I pled an emergency and told the swordfish story that I needed to section out a plank below the waterline. Okay, he told me, in a few days we can give you a week. No more. He gave me a date. Fine, we'll be there. Really appreciate it. Mahalo nui. A swordfish, huh? Yes, you heard that right. A swordfish story. And I love the thing it says story. Yeah, because in my mind, the swordfish thing is a complete fabrication, along with all the other explanations of how the couple came in possession of the Sea Wind. that a swordfish, rammed itself into their vessel. Now, does that happen? Absolutely. Can a swordfish hull penetrate this vessel? Absolutely, it can. Is it extremely rare? Absolutely. Is it maybe a hole of a bullet? That's what I think. That's what I truly think. I think it was a bullet hole in that vessel that they needed to cover up. Otherwise, they never would have put Iola in a dry dock, especially not back where it came from, right? But no, they had a bullet hole they needed to attend to, in my opinion. Let's continue reading from Palmyra, the True Story of an Island Tragedy by Wesley Buckwalker. When I told Steph, she suggested we better get some bottom paint, which was standard practice. Bottom paint contains mild toxins which prevent algae and other marine life from collecting on the underwater portion of the hull. It was not supposed to be allowed to entirely dry. The last thing the yachtsmen did before launching. Okay, right. We need some caulking fiber. We could give her some new paint topsides in a week. Yeah, what the hell. Replacing the plank won't take long at all. Might as well spruce her up all around. Side note, do you think the Seawind needed sprucing up by these two characters? Seriously, sprucing up? Like, get out of here. Personally, I think they're scumbags. That's my personal opinion. Lest you think me saying she wasn't found guilty of killing Muff is like my personal take on it. I have all kinds of opinions. We'll get to that. So I don't think that Seawind needing sprucing up by these characters. We can use the $400 we found to pay for it, Stephanie pointed out. That's okay, huh? Sure, good idea. Side note, that was Mac and Muff's money that was on the Seawind, not these folks' money to spend to strip her down. We got busy preparing Seawind, making lists of items we'd need. We began sanding down the topsides. I removed the gold figurehead and the varnished bow boards, stripping and preparing the hull between the waterline and rub rail, preparing the surface for another application of paint. I also sanded off the Iola appellation and painted over the name. So here we got the Seawind with a new name, new paint, and new owners. And the gall, I want to say the balls, the nuts of this couple that apparently feeling secure enough, Stephanie called the newspapers and placed a classified ad reading street side sale, anchors, propane stove with oven, binoculars, shredders, and more, and gave a place for the sale Saturday and Sunday 11 to 4. So seemingly the couple was looking to get rid of some of the extra things they didn't need for more money. That ad was placed on October 27th, 1974. On Veterans Day, that's October 28th, 1974, the couple cruised the Lokahi into Alawai Yacht Harbor. And, it's the Seawind now has seemingly new owners and new paint and a new name, but it wasn't disguising the old salts that had heard the Coast Guard announcement or the ones that knew the Seawind. They started contacting the FBI and the Coast Guard to do something about it. And you know what? They really weren't that responsive right away. In my opinion, it took the hated Pollock twisting arms and convincing them that this was a problem, that this was the Seawind and that it was likely stolen to get them to move. But then once they moved, they did the right thing. They got everything moving. So let's pick this up. After surveillance of Seawind at the Alawai Monday evening, the Coast Guard, Customs officials, FBI, and Pollock entered the harbor yesterday morning on the 41-foot patrol boat. The presence in the harbor of the FBI agents and other law officials was known at the Hawaii Yacht Club early in the morning and was the topic of conversation among coffee drinkers until the Coast Guard boat showed up about 9 a.m. The woman rowed Alan ashore to the club, and he sauntered off before he could be detained for questioning. She then returned to Seawind, and after dropping a bundle off at a nearby anchored boat, started rowing toward the Ilikai. Pollock said the patrol boat gave chase at a fast speed down the causeway, leading to the hotel, and both he and Wallish jumped from the Coast Guard vessel onto a dock to pursue her. Wallace found the woman in the lobby of the Ilokai Marina with her dog, Pollock reported. So basically, Pollock was one of the folks that recognized the couple and recognized they didn't need to be on that vessel. And so he notified the authorities. And they were slow. They were slow enough that Buck was able to get away. So the Coast Guard's coming right for them. Buck spots the Coast Guard. He dives into the water. He hides under a dock for like hours. And then he makes his way, away from the authorities. But Stephanie was arrested at the Ilokai. So she was arrested at the Ilokai Hotel after rowing to shore in the dinghy. She even stops to get her dog. And so that's when she is, essentially talked to by the authorities. So Buck escapes. This article reads, Walker, who had gone by the name of Roy A. Allen some weeks ago when he was at Palmyra, had been under surveillance for several hours by the Coast Guard before he managed to disappear from the end of a floating boat dock at the harbor. Walker dropped out of sight at just about the time a Coast Guard patrol boat started moving at a fast speed through the harbor in pursuit of Miss Stearns, who was rowing a small boat to shore. Miss Stearns was captured at the Ilokai Hotel. So Stephanie had been running. She had her dog Puffer running as fast as she could yesterday. And Bruce Wallace from the Coast Guard Intelligence stopped to question her. She then claimed she was not actually fleeing from the Coast Guard cutter as she rowed to shore. She said that she and Walker, who she had taken to the shore earlier, went there to use the toilet facilities. Well, why was she then found between the two building supports at the Ilokai, crouched down or whatever? I was scared, she replied. So Pollock was talking to her and the authorities were talking to her, and she seemingly made admissions to different things, which we'll bring up here. Here's a picture of the Coast Guard later taking the Sea Wind in tow. Stephanie told the press that she and her friend, that would be Buck, carried no illicit drugs. Yet the Coast Guard, doing an inventory of Sea Wind, said it came up with 2 pounds of marijuana seeds plus fertilizer, as if someone had hoped to grow it somewhere. And note that Buck will later joke around in his book that maybe the he didn't know there were 2 pounds of marijuana on the boat. Maybe the Grahams had some kind of plans that he didn't know about. Yeah, right. He's joking, but it's just not funny at all. And Pollock said that shortly after she was detained in a hotel, she went to the public restroom with her purse and sat in there flushing the toilet, repeatedly flushed the toilet while arresting officers and Pollock waited outside. Now, the prosecutors suggested that she may have been destroying vital evidence in the case, but later on, her attorney, Vincent Bugliosi, would argue that Pollock was, quote, intimately involved with the arrest and therefore he had bias. I believe also at another point regarding the flushing toilet that maybe it was assumed that there could have been somebody else in there with her flushing the toilet that wasn't necessarily her sitting in there flushing the toilet over and over. If it was a public restroom and she was allowed in there to use the toilet, it would be weird that people were also coming and going. So I don't know about that argument, but it was made. Of course, once things start going to trial, there's always going to be a question of when are you officially under arrest. Of course, if you make comments to the press, which she allegedly did, those, of course, jabbering to the press is a different story. It's not something that you can easily get knocked out because you didn't get read your Miranda rights. The USA, William McCorton, contended that Stephanie was not arrested at that time. Several hours later, when she was arrested, she was talking to the FBI and telling them that the boat did not belong to her or Walker, but to the Grahams. And FBI Special Agent Calvin Shishido said that she told him that she and Roy Allen loved the boat as much as the Grahams, and she felt she and Allen deserved it. Varying stories will be given by the defendants as to what happened to the Grahams. I'm not going to touch on that yet, but Stephanie made some, in my opinion, absolutely stupid and offensive, in my just galling statements. Here's one of them. Stearns said she and her friend, that would be Buck, made no effort to get in touch with the authorities to report the Grahams missing after she and Walker sailed the Seawind back to Honolulu for fear they would, quote, confiscate the boat. Well, no duh, right? It's not your boat. It's going to get confiscated. And this statement, and I do believe Bugliosi tried to keep this one out of the trial for the murder. The future for Miss Stearns and Allen was more or less undefined on Tuesday morning of this week as he walked out of the harbor area and authorities arrested her after she tried to flee in a rowboat from a pursuing Coast Guard patrol boat. Quote, "The boat wanted to go around the world again," she said, "and I wanted to go with it." Seemingly, there were two different stories told about how the couple came to acquire the Seawind. One, Buck had a story of the winner-take-all chess match from a quote-unquote carefree millionaire. So it's like Buck was playing chess against this guy that had all this money, and he won the Seawind. So that was one of the stories. And the second was that the Grahams drowned, and that Buck and Stephanie did not want to leave the Seawind there on Palmyra due to vandalism. So basically, the second story is like we're doing the Grahams' estate a favor by not leaving the Seawind on Palmyra to be vandalized. How incredibly thoughtful. At this point, the authorities and the FBI are interested to finally determine what happened to the Grahams and checking out Palmyra. The FBI also starts reaching out to the different people that corresponded with the Grahams in order to get copies of the correspondence to determine maybe what happened, if there was anything else to be discovered. And of course, you can't just beep over to Palmyra. It wasn't easy. So even for the Coast Guard and the FBI, they had to make a whole party in order to get there. And here I'm just going to include the ham radio call numbers for all the people involved that was going back and forth and relaying information back to the mainland and such. Some people held out little hope for finding the couple as referenced in this article, but Shoemaker, remember the one that first sounded the alarm, thought, initially when Vitasek had flown over that maybe he just didn't see the Grahams because there was a lot of vegetation there. But Briggs, another yachtsman that we'd already talked about, he said he didn't think the search party was going to find anything. On Halloween, that's October 31st, 1974, the FBI didn't allow a pool reporter to accompany the team to Palmyra, and I believe they took a 4-engine C-130 Coast Guard aircraft, and that flew the FBI to Fanning Island. Then from Fanning, they took a Navy tug over to Palmyra. So I think that's about 200 miles. And the search party was consisting of 2 FBI agents, 3 Coast Guard divers, 1 Coast Guard officer, and Jack Wheeler. And Wheeler will later recount, I think in one of these articles, what he thought he found, or what he found. The divers were limited by the depths, the current, and the sharks. So keep that in mind. And Jack Wheeler said the search party found a tent containing Buck's clothes, and in another location, the slightly charred remains of woman's clothing, jewelry, gold, pearls, earrings, and eyeglasses. And I ask, why leave gold? Maybe because it was a recognizable piece of jewelry. And I think it quotes here, it looked as if they'd thrown a drawer full of clothing on the fire. This article mentions how some of the party got seasick and that the 2 civilians along were Dr. Martin Vitusek and Jack Wheeler. At this point, the FBI was releasing photographs of Buck, wanted for questioning. And then, of course, it had him looking rugged and then him in his religious garb. Due to the defendant, at that point, Stephanie, her attorney, bringing up the issues of pre-trial publicity, there wasn't a whole lot being leaked out into the public about what they found or didn't find on Palmyra. But Pollock will later say at a boat trial that he found the hatch cover for the Iola on the island. Not a real good look to find the hatch cover for the Iola on Palmyra, if you get my meaning. This part did make the news about how in a radio report monitored by Freeman Lang, he was yet another one of the old salts, he heard that the federal officers say they found no evidence to indicate the couple were either, quote unquote, either alive or dead. And here, the next day, the defense attorney for Stephanie Stearns, who was in Halawa jail on a charge of stealing the Graham's yacht, the Sea Wind, attempted to stop what was considered prejudicial pretrial publicity. So the U.S. Attorney's Office shed no new light on what they found or didn't find on Palmyra. And then the federal magistrate judge, Harold Sullivan, he refused to issue a restraining order against any news accounts of the Graham's disappearance or to order the federal agents to refrain from saying what they found on Palmyra. And again, some of the information I've already told you will come out years later. It wasn't like it was splashed into the headlines at the time, but we'll talk about what they found is near a World War II vintage concrete storehouse. The group found the partially burned collection of clothing, a set of eyeglasses and earrings. It looked, he said, as if they'd thrown a drawer full of clothing on fire. And so more or less the Palmyra evidence was kept under wraps. But can you imagine being the relatives of Mac and Muff waiting on tenterhooks to hear whether they're on the island just as castaways now or what the story was? And so some of the old salts were trying to convince the FBI to communicate with the relatives to let them know the state of, play, whether Mac and Muff were on the island or not, what they thought. And Shoemaker had been in communication with Matt Graham's sister, and on the 6th, whenever the Coast Guard had actually issued their alert, and then again on the 9th, to try to touch base with her. And here's Matt Graham's sister begging the FBI for information regarding her brother and his wife. It says here, in the Radio Shack of Honolulu, ham operator Freeman Lang, the sister of missing yachtsman Malcolm Graham Jr., asked into the microphone, "Is my brother, Mr. Graham, dead?" "I really don't know," replied an FBI agent aboard a Navy tugboat about 1,000 miles away. "We didn't find either one of them." And towards the last paragraph, ham operator Lang said that with Miss Muncie, that's Mac's sister, at his side, he pleaded with an FBI agent on the tug to tell the sister what the party may have found. On learning of the indeterminate outcome of the brief search, Miss Muncie sat down and said, "Thank you," into the microphone and lapsed into silence. And meanwhile, Stephanie Stearns was in custody, being accused of stealing the couple's vessel, the Sea Wind, and the authorities were looking for old Buck who had dove into the water and hid underneath a boat dock and swam away once the furor died down and got away. So if you want to find out how they caught old Buck here and how the couple here, Stephanie and Buck, caught charges for the stealing of the Sea Wind, then stay tuned for part 4. Do the YouTubey things. Hit the like button. Hit that subscribe bell. And without further ado, have an excellent day. Bye.